Beginning next week, Reverend Darren Williams is going to start a workshop on stewardship for us. And let's start getting the word out now to all the members and even our friends and relatives who would love to come, because I'm sure it is going to be a powerful workshop and it will help us. I want us to enter into 2019 understanding what it truly means as being accountable in the hands of God and to each other, accountable to what He has purposed for His sake, and then also accountable to each other, whether that be in a home or wherever. But I don't know if Reverend William wants to give us any kind of assignments or any readings or whatever. Okay, he said just be here and be ready for him upon this coming Wednesday night. You know that we have our annual business meeting, and I'm sure, I didn't ask this Sunday, but I'm sure we want to have it again right after worship instead of coming back later that night. Is that the way? Yeah. We'll have it right after worship instead of coming back at 5:30. Also on Monday at 4:30 at Vernon, this task force that Andrew and I are leading for some inputs as to how we can start really educating our young people where they stop falling through the crack. We'll have a final recommendation given to the community, but this is what's also important, and I need to count on you for this. On Tuesday evening at 6 o'clock there at the Educational Service Center for the school board meeting, I need for us to be in such great numbers that they have to put us in other rooms because the meeting hall will not be large enough to hold all of us. Certainly, I have asked other preachers and other churches and the community at large to come to this. I'm praying that they do, but I know that I can count on you. And I would love for us to be there, just in support of. And I've even had some say, well, what are we coming to support? When I say our children, for all these years, are still falling through the crack, it says to us something needs to be done to Tulsa Public Schools so that our children will receive the education that they need. We have got to stop saying, well, if the parents would help, the children would be educated. This is what nobody seems to understand. Many of the parents of the kids now who are falling through the crack fell through the crack themselves. They don't know how to help educate their children now because they didn't get the education. Now, my college professor called that argumentative ignorance. You can't expect something from them who don't know how to do it because they were the subject themselves once upon a time. Those of us who God did bless to make it have got to make the difference. It's probably going to be cold Tuesday night, but I hope we wrap up, bundle up, layer up, and come to the Educational Service Center. Every leader, especially every preacher ought to be there. Don't be talking to me about your community concern as a preacher if you ain't at that meeting, because that is important for this community. Our children need to stop suffering. And my argument also goes, Tulsa Public School need to stop programming and preparing for the select few and include all children. All kind of programs out there, all kind of special whatevers out there. Emerson School, Monroe demonstrations, all those, but only certain kids get that privilege. And the rest, and they think a lot of time they're doing a great job because they have these programs and privileged whatevers, but all of our kids are not benefited from it. We want all of our kids to be educated. All of our kids. I'm tired of hearing, well, they can go to VOTEC. I'm tired of hearing that. If they choose to go to VOTEC, that's their business. But if they choose to go to college, they ought to be able to pass the ACT, the SAT. They ought to be able to meet the requirements of getting into college. You can't get into college when you're in high school reading on a third grade level. You can't do that. You can't pass the ACT to get there. So what do? They have no hope. So they go out and create their hope. And the hope that they create is always negative. And therefore, what we got to do now is build more prisons, send more to prison. And that's not what we should be doing. Tulsa Public School job is to educate, no matter what the obstacles are. They are to educate all the children in that district. And I'm not mad at any of that. I'm not mad at Booker T. I'm not mad at Carl. I'm not mad at the demonstration. I'm not mad at a parent who has finally found a solution for his or her child. I commend you and I'm happy for you. All I'm saying is we need to think about all the children. Our schools are threatened because their enrollment is so low. Well, where are our kids? They're opting out of the district. They're going to charter schools. They're going to home schools. But nobody stops to ask why. They're going because they're looking for some hope. They don't see it in the school system. And they don't want their children to fall through the crack, and you can't blame them for that. So they're doing what they got to do. But our tax dollars are going to Tulsa public schools. And we should demand. Daddy got on me because I was sending my kids to private school. He said, why do you let them get away with that? I said, well, I want my kids to get a good foundation. He said, you should demand that they give the good foundation. And when you don't demand that they give the foundation, good foundation, what do you got to do? You got to go to the private schools. But everybody don't have the money to go to the private school. All I'm arguing is we've got to stop just thinking about me and mine and think about all the kids, because all of these kids become threats to us if they are not with hope. They become threats to us. Our daughters, our sons, our homes, our community. I just think it's just time for all the playing, can I say BS? Time for all of that to stop. And we really get serious about educating our young people. Get serious about it and not be happy until our kids are being educated. Because it's time out for so many of our young people not being able to make it in life. They can't go get a job. They're embarrassed to work at the McDonald's. I understand that, but they are. So what do? They resort to other things. And even our young people are resorting to other things. The thing that got me involved in gang intervention was when a young Crip said to me, "You are damning me for my activity." Damning me for my activity. But you don't understand. When I sit in that house and see my mother, who's on welfare, trying to feed 6 kids, and who in the evenings are crying because she don't have the food for those 6 kids, I have to be a man and go out and help her. And because I can't get a job because I'm not 16 yet, I got a sling. And I make enough money selling dope so that my mom and my siblings can eat. Now, that blew me out of the saddle. Because we were saying at first, why are you involved in that activity? You're just ornery, lazy, mean, caught up. But he said, no, I want to help my mother. And I know I've heard the argument, well, some of these moms lay around and do nothing and don't do nothing but party and because they know their kids are out here doing. There are some, I'm sure, are doing that. But there are a lot who are not doing that, who's really struggling to try and take care of their family. And we just need the help. And I do believe the beginning of it all is certainly church, but close behind that is getting that education so that you can make your way in life. So please be there on Tuesday evening. I hope you're there on Sunday afternoon, but Tuesday evening is more important than Monday afternoon. Tuesday evening, go ahead. I'm sorry. Monday at 4:30 at Vernon AME Church. I promised when I took this task that I would come to the community for their input. And before I went to the school board, I will tell the community what the task force recommendation was going to be. That's what Monday afternoon is. And we chose Monday because it's Martin Luther King Day. A lot of people are in the area. Vernon is right in the area. They're already having a program that afternoon at 6 in honor of Martin Luther King. So we just asked if we could come at 4:30 and give our recommendation and get out of their way. But on Tuesday night, I will go before the board along with presenters from this task force to give our recommendation and pray that the school board honors that and work with that and making sure that our kids are educated. It's going to be a fight. It's going to be, let me scratch the word fight. It's going to be a hard task. It's going to be a hard task because all we keep hearing is we're already $17 million in the hole. Go ahead. Tuesday is at 6. Isn't that the school board time? 6:30? Well, yeah. But I gave 6 so that we can get there and hopefully get in the main auditorium. The main auditorium. Because I want to celebrate this task force, a great task force. I want to celebrate Andrea because she has been just really, really, really great with this. She has done a marvelous job. And I'm happy because she has made a name for herself in this community. There are people now who know who Andrea Chambers is. And they know she's for real. So that's a blessing for me. That's a blessing. But I want to celebrate this community too because they said we don't care. But I want to show as a community that we do care. For 30 years I've been on these task force and committees and nothing ever happens. 5 years after the task force has been dissolved, we are back with another task force trying to do the same thing that we did 5 years previous. But that's my plea. That's my plea for you to come and help us in this effort. Then remember, on Martin Luther King Day, we will join Southern Hills Baptist Church again in the parade. Now, you all are going to stand in for me this time because I dare not get out in that cold again. I ain't trying to bring no hospital up on me again. But I am going to ride in the van. And Dr. Hess is going to ride with me in the van. But those of us who can, because they tell me it's going to be cold. Is that right? All you praying folk, y'all ought to be able to now bring a little bit of heat up in here now, something now. But those of us who can, let's march again with Southern Hills. If I could, I would, but I'm not going to chance it. I'm going to get in the van and ride. Go ahead. Yes, Andrea sent that. She's also sent it out. She gave your email and so forth. I'll make sure she has that to you. Because she texted me and said that she received it and she sent it out. But I'll make sure you have that. Okay, all right. Haskell in Boston. Okay. That's where we met last year, isn't it? Oh, okay. Okay. You know, it's out on the board, and Angela will be sending the email to Ann. Okay, I don't have very long, and it really won't take very long. But in this spirit of being ready and accountable, prepared for this that God is going to do with us in 2019, I want us to go to James' 3rd chapter. James talks about the tongue. And he says that although the tongue is untamable, uncontrollable, it's still our job to work every day to control it. And he even seemed to suggest that it's an impossible task because evil, he says we put a bit in a horse's mouth. And I have horses. And I know that if you want to have control of a horse, the thing you've got to do is take his head away from him. And the way you do that is to put that bit in his mouth that lays on top of his tongue. And when you give pressure to that, he tries to get away from that pressure. And he learns the only way I get away from that pressure, that hurt, is to be obedient. So he starts obeying your command, and he starts participating in that ride. He also said that as large as a ship is, no matter how great the wind is, there's a little rudder that controls that ship. Said, but a man's tongue is dangerous. And the thing that I really liked about this presentation, well, what I saw in the presentation, what I liked about it was, he's not so much talking about the effect your tongue has upon somebody else, but the effect your tongue have upon you. Because he suggests that if you're able to control your tongue, then you control your whole person. If you can bring discipline to your tongue, you can bring discipline to your whole person, your whole body. Because when you use your tongue, and he almost puts, matter of fact, I'm even going as far as to say, he puts it in the sense that your tongue is that weapon that evil wants to use to control you so that whatever you plan to do in this purpose of God, it's affected. And you find yourself not getting there. But he says, even so the tongue is a little member, 5th verse, and boasts great things. But he says, see how great a forest a little fire kindles. One commentator I was reading said that if to destroy the forest you took an axe, you can only cut down one tree at a time. But when fire comes through that forest, it's affecting tree after tree almost at the same time. You know what he's saying? Your tongue is not, and I'm going to use the other person, your tongue is not just cutting down one person. Your tongue is cutting down many persons. But that's not where I want to be tonight. He's saying your tongue is not only affecting you in one area of your life, it's affecting your whole life. When you cannot control your tongue, your whole life is in disarray. We love to gossip. And some of us even commend ourselves upon gossiping because we're sharing information that pleases people. People want to hear it. And I ain't never seen anybody mad receiving gossip. Would I be wrong? I wouldn't be wrong. Somewhat? You may not want to hear that. Then you are not a gossiper. But people who gossip loves gossip. And they are excited when gossip comes their way. Now, would you buy that? That fire goes through that forest. Then he says down in 8, but no man can tame the tongue. It is an unruly evil full of deadly poison. With it we bless God and Father, and with it we curse men. We have been made in the who have been made in the similitude of God. When you don't control what you say, and how many of us have said something that we regretted we said later on? As good as our hearts were, as good as our intent was, something came out of our mouth that we hurt somebody with, that we really didn't intend to hurt. But when you are not 24/7 keeping a check on your tongue, things can come out of your mouth that you regret later on. Again, my argument goes, the world is full of good people who are sometimes bad versus the argument that the world is full of bad people who are sometimes good. I believe there are good people who do some bad things, who do some crazy things. But I'm arguing that the reason we are doing that is because we are not keeping check on our person. You have to. Let me put it this way. I think we spend more time making sure everybody else do right than we do making sure we do right. When our job should be to make sure we do right so that we don't spread that fire, so that we don't get this thing where people are being just hurt. And again, my emphasis tonight, so that we can be whole people, be a whole person, so that when God gets ready to use us, he finds a vessel that he can use. Verse 11, does a spring send forth fresh water and bitter water from the same opening? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olives, or a grapevine bear figs? Does no spring yield both salt water and fresh? One or the other. We have to stop being double-minded. One thing today and something else tomorrow, or the one moment this and the next moment we're something else. I think the reason why there are those who don't respect our person is because our person is so confused, shows so many different sides. that people don't know how to take us. So a lot of times people shy away from us. Let me ask you this. Did it hurt you when you heard that the reason some don't want to come to church is because the church is full of people doing the same thing that they do? Did that bother you? No. It didn't bother you? That no big deal about going to the club because all the people in church was at the club Saturday night, Friday night. Now, I'm not arguing whether all that's right or wrong or good or bad. I'm not arguing that. I'm just telling you what people think. Because a lot of times we are not. So James seems to say, if you can control what you say, you can certainly control what you do. So he says that you got to control your tongue. And this really gets me. I'm just telling the truth. As if you're telling the truth. Paul, and I don't know if you were as taken back with this statement as I was. All things may be lawful, but all things are not expedient. My dad has said, you can do a good thing in a wrong way. Sometimes, just because it is the truth, don't mean you ought to say it for that moment. Would you buy that? But I was just telling the truth. And my job is to tell the truth and then let God do with the truth what he going to do with the truth. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. Sometimes, though we know the truth about this person, for that person's sake, we don't need to be running around telling everybody about it. For that person's sake. And for our sake. Because if I am going to be that instrument in God's hand that he is leading and directing, and I'm doing it his way, God don't expose all of our closets. Would you buy that? And he knows it's the truth. It's in our closet. But for some of us, he kept the door closed. But when we learn something on somebody, oh my God, it's the truth. And you don't help that person. You don't end up helping that person. But a lot of what we say is nothing more than what we have assumed to be the truth. We don't know if it's true or not. It seems reasonable to us that it is true. And look, listen to this. What I have seen and what I have heard says it is true. And how many times we have been so mistaken it wasn't even true. But the damage that it did, the forest that it burned down, the devastation that it caused. I was just telling the truth, and God wants me to tell the truth. But I'm glad that he looked past the fault and saw the need. He did not address the fault, which was the truth, but he saw the need. God didn't say he didn't do it. God just said, I'm not going to act on it right now. I'm going to give another chance. I'm going to do something in order to help him get to where I need for him to be. But if we got a reason to damn somebody, you can rest assured we are going to damn them. It's almost like for me to tear somebody else down makes me important. It builds me up. It makes me more the Christian because I can say that Phil is a sinner. But no, controlling our tongue. Stop assuming we know. And I'm going even further and say, though we know, ask God, what am I supposed to do with this? Because you are responsible for what you know. Now, you do know that, don't you? But you need to ask God what he wants you to do with what you know. Some people we could have brought to God if we had been a little bit more careful how we treated the situation. But by damning them and sending them to hell, and it ain't even the judgment yet, we ran them away from God. They saw no hope. The truth. Controlling what we do. Again, James suggests that if we can control the tongue, we can control what we do. Again, James says, yes, people react from what you say. And you ought to be careful for that. But what I'm more concerned with, James says, is when you don't have control of your tongue, you are doing more damage to you. You are taking yourself away from being that instrument that God can use. Because all of us are here simply for that. We're here to simply help somebody else get to heaven. That's our task. It's just not about us. So James said, and then when you look at that latter part, in that 14th verse. Well, I'll go back up to the 13th. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by good conduct that his works are done in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and self-seeking in your hearts, do not boast and lie against the truth. Have you seen people who can't get to service because they're so busy promoting themselves? You ever seen that? What they do is to promote themselves and not promote the kingdom of God or somebody else. This wisdom does not descend from above, but is earthly, sensual, demonic. For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and evil things are there. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Pure, peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. I don't care if you don't like it. I'm going to tell you the truth because it's going to make you better. Who got a problem with that? But sometimes the way that we tell the truth about the person leaves the person with no hope for salvation. We tear down instead of build up. The truth ought to build up. The truth ought to bring peace to that person. The truth ought to bring peace to you. It ought to do that. Now, the fruit of righteousness is sworn in peace by those who make peace. All I wanted to do tonight was, in this preparation for what God is wanting us to do, some of us, and I may even go as far to say many of us, will have to make sure that we get our tongues in check. Not that we are evil people, It's just that we are not careful for what we say, how we say it, when we're trying to be this instrument. That's very, very important. You can't always bring hellfire, brimstone, and damnation. Sometimes a peaceful word does more to bring somebody to salvation than you're reading the 23rd Psalms. Sometimes just to take somebody's hand and hold it, not saying anything, is more powerful than the 15-minute prayer you prayed over them. Peaceful. Sometimes people who are in a storm just want to know that they're loved. All they want to know is somebody is thinking about them. Somebody cares for them. But when we come with this, you that, you ain't, and how often do we, little kids, we have a habit of saying, you sure are bad. You just bad. Now, Marcus, my son, who was bad, said to me, you need to stop saying to little kids you're bad, because that's implanting in them the idea that they are bad. And I said, I sure wish that had been your experience when growing up. But sometimes that kid just I had a friend, powerful friend, who had two boys. And those boys simply went to the fair just for an evening at the fair. But while at the fair that evening, a gang stepped up on them and started acting crazy with them. Well, another gang came and intervened in that and said, leave them alone. Well, because the first gang was outnumbered by the second gang, the first gang went on. But the second gang now claimed them as their own. We saved you from. So they were asked to become members of Crips. That was the second gang, Crips. And because they had been helped that way, they agreed. So they found in that gang the love that they were not getting at home. So the daddy said, if they want to be and do as men, I'm going to treat them as men. So it wasn't nothing for them to have a boxing match, a real down-to-life throwdown. Because he said, if they're going to act like men, I'm going to treat them like men. But what he came to find out was all those boys wanted was their daddy to hug them. Now, it took prison to bring that acknowledgement out of them, because they had always been taught to be rough and tough. You get on the football field and you don't be a sissy. If you get knocked down, you don't cry. You don't take the scar, the scratch, and run to the house wanting something put on it. You grab some dirt and rub it on there and you keep on. But all those boys wanted was a hug from their daddy. But it took prison, several years of prison, to make that happen. But by the time the dad learned this and started extending those hugs, the boys had felonies, which meant difficult getting a job. They had fines that they couldn't pay because they had felonies and couldn't get a job. So the revolving door just kept opening and opening and opening and opening. They were continuously behind the 8 ball. And that father said, I wished I had Not only when they were little kids, but even when they were in middle school. Just walked up to him and said, "Come here, boy," and just hugged them. Sometimes a person benefits more out of your kindness, your touch, your words of peace, than they do you reading a verse of scripture or praying a prayer. So it's how we approach people. But again, I want us to remember, we are saying, control your tongue for your sake, so that you can remain that instrument. Because God can use you. That 18th verse, you read it again. Oh, we'll start back up at this 13th. When there is no peace in you, when you're full of hypocrisy, okay. But don't forget, help me Tuesday evening. Tell your friends, neighbors, children, whomever, to come. Because if we can show 400 or so people at that school board meeting, I think they will begin at least to get the message that we're going to be serious this time. That we're not just going to give a recommendation and walk away. And we understood from the start that they wanted us to recommend what they wanted recommended. But we refused to do that. Refused to do that. And I had some people who didn't mind saying no. So that's why I'm just thinking this time, I see God in this, and I see something happening. And maybe our children will finally find some hope. Because if you got a president who don't care nothing about a person not getting his paycheck, and he talking about they understand and they are agreeing with me, you ain't going to agree with nobody and you hungry, can't pay your mortgage, about to lose your car or whatever. You can't, that makes no sense. But, and then you see the FBI is investigating him with Russia, who has been our enemy forever plus 2 days. Something needs to happen. But again, let's focus on our children. And if we can, in years to come, make sure that they are prepared, then maybe things will start turning around. But I'm going to quit so you can go to your auxiliary meeting. Remember, next Wednesday, Reverend Williams is going to start his presentation on stewardship. And let's be here to hear that. And let everybody else know. It'll be right after prayer meeting, 6:00. Go ahead, Jack. Yeah, right after prayer meeting. And we won't have auxiliary meetings. Well, we're going to start that differently anyway. But go ahead. What are you saying, Jack? Someone help me. What time? What now? On Tuesday? I'd like for us to be there at 6. The meeting is not really going to start until 6:30. The Educational Service Center on, what is that, 31st, right off of Harvard? New Haven. Yeah. And it's inside, so we won't be cold. Okay, I dismiss for your auxiliary meeting. I'm sorry. Have I? Yes, I'm glad you missed that. Thanks, Angie. Miss Stevens' service is going to be Saturday week. And I'm sure hoping that all of us, all of those many, many years Miss Stevens gave to this church with She and Miss Porter were the first who organized that Life Preservers Club. At that time, it was all women. She was secretary at this church for forever, financial secretary at this church forever. Everything she did was wonderful. Now, she wasn't going to let you walk over her now. She could tell you where to get off now with no uncertain terms, but I really love me some Martha Stevens. She was dedicated. Saturday after this Saturday. But yes. I'm sorry. I think it was at 11. But we'll announce it Sunday. Call. You know, she only got the 2 children left, Carl and Deborah Ray. Deborah Ray is in St. Louis. But Carl is here in Oklahoma City. So Carl is getting stuff together right now. And he said he'll get back with me when things are ready to move forward. But whenever they are, whatever they are, we'll be ready for them. Because Miss Stevens, we owe her. And certainly our being present for her homegoing is a good way of saying thank you. Thank you. And to her children worked here. Larry, Linda, they were Carl and Deborah Ray were always in other cities, but Linda and Larry worked here in this church. So let's just be here to say thanks. All right, we are dismissed. Yes. Oh, okay.